Right, let's have a look at the sport, shall we? Just approaching 8:45. Chetan is here. We're going to talk Six Nations. No great surprise that Ireland won it. They were the favourites at the beginning, but nonetheless, it was exciting, wasn't it?
It was, and look, we wanted real high jeopardy and high stakes yesterday, and it was there. 4 teams could potentially have won it on the final day. It was only really ever about Ireland getting it terribly wrong. Had Scotland got a big win, it could have opened up a bit of hope for France and for England. But they are the best side in the Six Nations. They are absolutely deserving of consecutive titles. Though Scotland really battled hard, deserve a lot of credit for their performance in Dublin yesterday, where they don't have a particularly good record. Ireland the winners. England-France ended up being a cracker anyway, and England narrowly edged out. But I think it's fair to say they've made a lot of progress in these Six Nations, not least with that win over Ireland last weekend. For Wales, not so good. And Warren Gatland, after the defeat to Italy in Cardiff, which meant no wins for Wales, they finished bottom, they get that wooden spoon. He did hand in his resignation in, but it was rejected. He still feels confident he can move Wales forward, but it doesn't look particularly great for Welsh rugby at the moment, although the young side at times during the Six Nations handled themselves very well. But the story, Ireland, those celebrations continuing into St Patrick's Day today. From Dublin, Andy Swiss reports.
Six Nations champions for the second year running.
For Ireland, it's becoming a gloriously familiar sight. Champions once more, but goodness, they had to work for it. It was a day of high tension and also high emotion. The hosts knew a win would clinch the title.
Scottish line out.
And when Scotland obligingly threw the ball straight to Dan Sheehan,
the Irish hooker opens the home side's account in Dublin.
They seemed on their way. But Ireland led by just a point at the break, and as the errors grew, so did the worried faces. When Andrew Porter eventually crashed over, Dublin breathed a collective sigh of relief.
Hard for the line! This time they're there.
But Scotland weren't done, as with just minutes left, Hugh Jones set up a nerve-jangling finale.
And there's a step, and there is Hugh Jones for Scotland.
But it was too little, too late. Ireland clung on for the second year in a row, the Six Nations champions.
To be in a position to win a championship is pretty special, and you know, life's all about memories, isn't it? And stuff like this is what dreams are made of.
And so for Ireland's players, another night of Six Nations celebration. Once again, the trophy and the title are in their hands.
Behind them, the runners-up spot went to France after they beat England in thrilling fashion. England looked to have snatched it as Tommy Freeman's try and George Ford's nerveless conversion edged them ahead. With just a minute left, a penalty for Thomas Ramos from the halfway line. And guess what? A 33-31 win for France. For England, after some dazzling rugby, an ultimately disappointing finish. Not nearly as disappointing, though, as for Wales. They ended with a first wooden spoon for 21 years, as Italy proved far too good. Lorenzo Pani with the pick of their tries on a grim day for the hosts. The retiring George North had to be helped from the field, and afterwards coach Warren Gatland offered his resignation. It was rejected, but he knows the rebuild will not be easy. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Yeah, disappointment for Wales. Those celebrations, though, for Ireland. And really pleased to say, joining us on Breakfast now, former Scotland international John Barclay. John, thanks for being with us. Well, we will talk about Scotland, I promise, because that was an impressive performance for them in Dublin. But Ireland, so much emotion around that game yesterday. Peter O'Mahony in particular as captain. We may not see him again in international rugby. 5 Six Nations titles for him. It maybe wasn't quite the grand finale that Ireland wanted to deliver, that defeat to England and the manner of that performance against Scotland, but they still are the standout side in the Six Nations. How do you sum up this championship for them?
I think everyone thought what happened, to be honest. If you look at Ireland, I think, yeah, there's a little bit of gloss potentially taken off the actual championship, but I think Andy Farrell and Peter O'Mahony, and listen to Brian O'Driscoll afterwards speaking about, they're not a country that takes that lightly. And yes, of course, they want to win a Grand Slam. Every country does, but it just highlights just how hard it is to win one. So they were made to work reasonably hard yesterday, but if you're honest, they cruised through much of that championship. Yeah, they slipped up against a really formidable England side at Twickenham, but they are still the standard bearers for the Six Nations.
People talking about where are they in in terms of the list of the all-time greats. And, of course, had they backed this up with another Grand Slam, which England denied them, we may more easily come to that conclusion. How do you rate them in terms of Six Nations history? Where do they stand in terms of this particular side?
I think we're quite quick, and I think some of the Irish media have probably backed this up to throw around legendary status and greatness. I think they're one of the best teams that Ireland have ever had, clearly. And had they won a Grand Slam, would that have changed that narrative? Potentially. But they're a team that will probably be judged on World Cup success or non-success. So I think they're right up there. I think you look at how they dismantle teams, the standards they've set, how cohesive they are. They are the shining light in international rugby for me at the moment.
Scotland put in a great performance. Bear in mind what happened to Italy against Italy last weekend with that defeat. Fourth place for them in the end. Yes, the Calcutta Cup, the win over England too. Are you happy with fourth in the end?
No. And I think there were so many questions. If you look at all the teams, there were so many questions. What Ireland would we see after the World Cup? What France would we see after the World Cup? Italy, would they be able to show some improvement? But actually, the question around Scotland was, can they go to 4 wins in the championship? Can they go beyond that? And they ended up with 2. And it was a championship that midway through was looking so positive. There was a coulda, woulda, shoulda game against France, but then to slip up in Italy, I think I didn't expect them to go to Ireland. Or certainly the size of the challenge was huge, but it'd be a championship, again, remembered for being an underachieving one.
It's disappointing for Scotland, and we'll talk about England in a moment. For Wales, they must, I mean, because rugby is so, it's in their DNA, isn't it? You know, it must be so disappointing.
And they're a nation that have become accustomed to success. And I think you look even back a couple of years, the Six Nations success potentially papered over some of the issues in the wider game in Wales. So it's, I was down there post-game. There's a
George North, he finished, didn't he, after the game?
He came off.
The finish he wanted.
No, and he's players like him and of his generation. You look at the players in his generation, the Sam Warburtons, Alan Wynne-Jones, Dan Lydia, it's Jamie Roberts. You know, British and Irish Lions were just littered through that team, and it's a team now which is struggling to see where the answers are. Regional rugby is really struggling in Wales. There's further budget cuts, so it's a big rebuild for Wales, and you think this could take some time.
And finally, let's talk about England. Finished third. Is that a fair representation of where they are?
I think so, yeah. I think, again, I talked about questions earlier. The question was, you know, what is England's identity and how do they want to be viewed by people watching the game? And they went to Ireland and did the unthinkable. They did what no team's done in I think, 18 or 19 games in the Six Nations. So they could have won that game as well, but for a last-minute, you know, penalty, which could have not been a penalty on another day. So I think there's real green shoots from this England team. You look at the quality of players, you look at the style of rugby they're trying to play, their defence, and I really think it is coming together for England now. I think they will be a force again next year going forward.
And Steve Borthwick at the end saying that the shirt seems to feel lighter on the players and that they are improving. I think you're right, England will take a lot of positives from it. John, we'll have to leave it there for time. So much more we could have dug into, whether Warren Gatland should stay or go. Italy, of course, had an incredible Six Nations as well, but we'll leave it there for time. John, thank you.
Thank you.
From consecutive Six Nations titles for Ireland